Hello and welcome. It is the first day of April 2019, or it's the completion of such as there is 97 minutes to go until midnight as I'm doing this 10:23 p.m. at Eastern Time. And what has happened since, well, really in here, but over the last 3-4 hours, is making an extremely strong statement from my view within this chart, hence the reason why I'm doing it. And what I'm showing is how I am viewing this market. If, and yeah, I am, if I was trading this, what I would be doing. So, without further ado, let's get started. This is a single hour. I'm going to go back to it again, but until then, this is the daily term. And amongst it, after the big decline and it just went just so far, but not far enough in my liking, I would have rather to hit 33,000 even, only because I had a significant buy at around 33,280 on the TUSD, which represents a hair over 3,000, but it didn't hit. However, since that point, resistance, little pullback, resistance, bigger pullback, resistance, little pullback, and how it's been grinding its way up in the last 4 days is saying a lot as I'm looking at it. And I realize when it's breaking out from this level, leaving the 18 average, the potential gains can just be phenomenal. Let's move this chart to the Bitstamp exchange so I can actually draw on the screen. Okay, here we have it. So the potential, and I got those lines 4,800. You know, I could hit this little area as a good level, or what's another way of putting it? A decent result. There we go. But the possibility or the probability of resistance, I don't think, is anywhere near greater than 90%, which is a high number, but oftentimes these levels are just that. And then when it's resistance, the parlay has to come in. Will it be good enough resistance where you would want to buy back, or it becomes that of a good sell? Because you can run into situations where you're like, yeah, it's going to go up here, I'm going to sell. And this can be any market too, for just this whole pattern. Therefore, you come up here, you sell this, and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy it back when it comes back to where it came from in here. And maybe you're right, it is resistance, but it corrects through time for many days, or it only comes down to 45. And that's why when I look at on the trading aspect, if I'm looking to sell at a spot, I think it's going to stop going higher, and I look to want to buy it back, it is really a parlay bet. You're betting at one, that it's a level where it's the area of a good resistance point, and B, that it's going to actually come back to where you would buy it. And then when that happens, it becomes a winning trade as far as I'm concerned. Although, when you're selling markets, and let's just assume this is whatever altcoin, and even Bitcoin for that matter, if you're selling it this way, and you sell some, and let's just assume you sell it, let's say 4,800, but this is the breakout, we'll call it, in the sense where it just keeps on going up, and well, it never goes down to where you would buy ever again. Although those buy order or those sales are just going to get accumulated, and you're just going to have to do something with them over time. But when you're doing that on trades, you're just getting your dollar cost or Bitcoin cost average, and then you're getting your early share of the trades, which hopefully will be very small compared to what you'd be selling at higher prices. For myself, as far as using cryptocurrencies as form of a payment, there's some things I want to buy, but I've been waiting for it because I'm thinking, well, geez, if this breaks out, I'll just wait to buy it when it gets up here and just get a bit better of a deal. And I hope it goes up decent because then I get a better deal on it. But for me, that's all I'm doing. So in the single hour term, and let's just again bring it back to the daily chart. Okay, let's get it. Why isn't that doing? Okay, there we go. But horizontal ray in, right in here, which was the area of this resistance in here. For we've had all of these highs that I've talked about, and since the last big one, after the third week of February, it makes these patterns of, we'll just stay within this 18 for quite some time, breaking out for maybe 5 or 6 days, and then hanging in there, small little correctionary move, but the very quick retreat or comeback. We can see in this chart on the shorter term there was a failed breakdown, and now there has been a fast move higher. So when I say oftentimes failed moves can create fast moves in the opposite direction, and that happens. And I'm not the one that originally said that. Brian Shannon said was what the person I used to watch all the time, and I still watch him. He says that all the time, and it's one of the things that I copy from what he says. He says risk management is job number one. I say risk reward management is job number one because I'm just being just trying to be exact or as I like to say proper as I can in the sense that yeah, it's good to understand risk, but it's also good to understand that reward. And as we can see on the single hour, what occurred was it did support this area 3 times, piercing below and then twice later piercing above. And you know what? It can pierce. No, it didn't pierce above twice. It hit it perfect twice. Well, in how I drew the line there, it did. Of course, when it hit resistance, it pierced below it the first time. Well, and the area is always what I'm looking for, and that was most certainly the case in here. And maybe other exchanges maybe did or whatever. And quite frankly, this move did go back to where it did come from. Just the last two after that were Pierce extras. And then we had at first this level of resistance established, and it was a big one. I'm not going to draw a horizontal ray at 41, which of course is already that big Fibonacci line on the long term we've been talking about, or I've been showing for months now. And and that's something to consider how big that level is, that we're seeing when you're looking at a long-term level and you have a spot where things are changing for that time frame, which it is, and then that's where you can shorten it down to time frames that are usually only referred to short-term traders. But if you're a long-term trader and you're in a situation where things are going wild, well then that's maybe a good idea to use the short-term time frame to help things out. What it did establish was this resistance level at this 20-hour period here, which is where I will place the horizontal ray. And among it, it has a resistance test, again, on the 2100 hour period yesterday, which is about 26 hours ago. And it happened after the previous period before. It came down and quickly touched this line and then shot right back up, as I mentioned earlier this afternoon. That's oftentimes what you get before a big move, and this is really showing to be that of a spectacular move. And within technical analysis, oftentimes when you establish resistance levels, it's not a surprise or it's not uncommon for it to have a quick move back down, or in turn spend very little time in the area in which it resisted, as we can see was the case here on March 19th at the 19 and 2100 hour time frame. But since it got up here on March 21st, it first resisted that level but stayed in its point, and then it got above it, and now instead of resisting 4130, it supported it. And as it continues on since in here, you're supporting it, come down to the new, well, not the newly rising 18 lows, the newer highly low hit period on there. And even more short term now, and as it's now getting out above this, we can see, okay, a clear break above this line at 4130. It's time to be serious about this. And that's not even close to a clear break at 21 here, not even maybe. But in here we can see, yes, there's a clear break. And one of the things you want to see, and I've said this before, and again, this is something that Brian Shannon taught me. When a spot like this happens, and you have that break, now it's important to see how it holds that move. Can it hold and stay like this above it? Because if it does, that's what's oftentimes going to show you that the setup is real, and it's just a matter of time before what we're seeing now is coming into play. And I haven't even looked yet at the 15 and 5, but I got to do it. Because the story on the last 3 hours is saying a lot. With 22 minutes and 22 seconds to go, as I'm doing this recording, 10:37 p.m. Eastern Time, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I don't live there. So anyway, 3 periods in here. This one here was the one where it broke out above the 18 average high in the attempt to make a new move, and we can see it's doing it. It pulls back in here, and even back to 41.39. And this hour, it's just having a phenomenal period. It's already established a high higher than this, and really, tops and bottoms are known after the fact. So therefore, when it broke this resistance and it had this high, oh, there's the high. Yeah, that's no, it wasn't, because 2 periods later, right now, it has broke it, and it's probably going to break it again, where we see it now standing at 41.76. On the 5 minute term, let's just go to the 15 first. And yeah, this is what I'm looking for right in here. And it shows it just so clear. And yeah, it's even looking good just for the last 3 periods here as well. We have the resistance level, which comes back to where it came from. So a spot like this, we've had a lot of this resistance in here and the few periods before. So whenever you have a situation on a break above it, a significant move, well, it's either going to be a failed breakout or a start of a new breakout. And right now it's looking like the latter, the start of a new breakout, because it comes back quickly, which is fine. It can do it quickly, it can do it 5 periods later, either way. But it's always important to hold where it came from. Hold this 18. Those 18 lows is very important not to fail. It didn't even need to test that area. It did test where it came from. It did test the 18 highs, and thus successfully. And as we can see within these 3 periods in here, how it managed to get back to this point. And this is that spot I've said before that I don't like to predict, because I don't think the bet in here for betting that there's going to be resistance, realize that I can buy it back in here, is that good of a bet. And we can see right now it's looking like it probably isn't. And thus, is it going to have that decent size leg higher? And I am just talking about the 15 minute. But again, as I scroll back again, it's showing that breakout above key resistance here on the hour. On the 4 hour time frame, it's pretty much doing the exact same thing. Okay, weekly, we'll get to that in a second. But the daily, yeah, it's just continuing what it established, what it said it was doing on March 29th, because on March 27th, March 28th, it made the statement, the market that is, that it was going to attempt to resume the trend, because it wasn't a clear breakout above the highs. It didn't get above this level of resistance, but it did come from this lower end. It was at that higher end of resistance for support, and in doing so, because of the pause period after this, when we look back in this situation, when you have that good green move and hold it, it's like, yeah, I got speaking as the market, I had this great up move. Okay, I did what I did in the 24-hour allocation of time, and then you take a little breather the next day. Nothing much goes on. Sellers don't come in to take any decent profits from that last move. And then you get continuation to the upside. And from that point, just a little bit of sideways action, which means that a lot of that short-term correction has been done. And amongst us on the weekly chart, it's been consolidating within this 18 average since the February 4th period. It has now been 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 periods. This is the ninth week since it hit this 18 lows. Enough for the 18 lows to first start to flatten out, and the highs that is. And now, because of this nice little uptrend we can see, and the price action has stayed well above it since lifting off in here from the last time it hit it on the 18th, that it's barely starting to rise. Volatility obviously is microscopic, but that changes when the game changes, when the story of the game changes, when I call the status, what's it doing, attempting to do this, doing that. So as I mentioned so many of these charts, the situation in here was attempting to establish another leg higher after it got above this resistance, and it's doing that. And in this case, attempt to do stage number 2 for what I call the reversal of trend. That's establish a level of resistance and then breaking out above this level of resistance, especially seeing it when we look at it via the daily. When you see the price action come in at 43, 44, 45, 46, well, I would expect there's a better chance of seeing green candles that would more towards these sizes than I would towards any of these sizes of moves. And that will conclude this evening's bonus video. This nighttime. I'll be going to bed soon, as it is 10:43. But But that will conclude this video, which never was planned. It's just, man, I like this setup, and well, we'll see what happens in the morning, because to me, there's a lot of reason, just on the short term, to be optimistic that this is going to set some price moves up here. Now, what would happen with the altcoins if a move like this is to happen? There's no guarantee they're going to go up with it, at least against Bitcoin when I say that. Very highly likely that if Bitcoin has any kind of decent move, 15, 20, 30 plus percent, that other coins against the US dollar are going to have good moves. Don't be surprised. I think you'd be favored. I don't this isn't for sure though. I think it'd be favored for the rest of the class, the Litecoin, the Ethereum, and all the other coins to outperform Bitcoin during that run. But there's always a possibility where you can see the Bitcoin market with major red moves. And this hasn't happened in a long time, but it is worth talking about. If you ever have a spot where Bitcoin goes up really big, and let's just assume it goes to even 5,200, that's a gain of like, we'll say 1,000 basis points, or a little over 22%. And then next thing you know, you look at all the coins against Bitcoin, down 15%, down 18%, down 12%, down 7%, down 14%. Why would that be? And that would be that the altcoins just aren't going up as well as I would against Bitcoin. You would see maybe Litecoin might be one of those examples where Bitcoin goes from 4,000 to 6,000. Yet, and that's a 50% move. Or let's just even go to the 5,000, 4,000 to 5,000, or the 20 plus percent. And then Litecoin goes from $60 to 64 or 65. But we could see Litecoin go from 60 to 125. Well, Bitcoin goes from 4,000 to 55. It can work in both directions. And even if the altcoin markets don't have a nice little bullish setup, when this is at that point, and if and when I should be saying, but when you see price action clearly at 5,400-ish or so, then that's clear break of resistance, at least discounting this one. The clear break of this more important one, which is where price is pretty much at right now, which is high 41s, 4170 is a good number. If it's clearly above it, then that clears the signal, changes the story, because the story has been consolidating this last move down, as it, of course, had this resistance in here hit. Since this point it hit, it has not had a clear break above here. It hasn't even came close to testing this. Well, hasn't even tested this. The closest it came was a noticeable move higher. So from that point, it only took like 4 days to get from here to here. And yet, since then, this happened on like December 19th. So all of January, all of February, all of March, and a little bit of extra time, over 3 months of extreme microscopically smaller volatility. And it can all change on a heartbeat. And usually in situations when it does like that is when I would expect it to go down. This could also be the start of a major game changer in the cryptocurrency market, because if this is one of those types of breakouts that just holds and stays well, then we could be looking at what we've seen a few times before, where we have a multi-month run with cryptos just having spectacular moves. And then to throw off another point that I just stated as well, another interesting thing, especially if something happens that I mentioned beforehand, that the market goes up, but cryptos, the altcoins don't go up as much. Well, that to me would state people are buying Bitcoin and just not doing anything else with it. They're not buying anything else. And sometimes people will be buying Bitcoin just so they can buy whatever other coin, even though they could easily buy Litecoin this way. But especially when you're talking about all the other non-top 4, 5, 6 coins that are easier to buy against the dollar. But if you want a coin like Theta coin or Dash, well, Dash is one of the more common ones. But if you want Theta, or if you want Komodo, or if you want any of those smaller ones, Neo, I guess in here, it's so much easier just to buy your Bitcoin, and then you take your Bitcoin to whatever exchange, and then you buy your altcoins that way. Which means, in theory, Bitcoin would get the first pop, and then the altcoins would get a quick pop thereafter. But You can oftentimes get situations where this will have its move, and then you're going to have an altcoin move where Bitcoin won't go up as much. Maybe Bitcoin will do some sideways moves, and the altcoins go up, and that would be a spot where people, holders of Bitcoin, would be buying that coin, the altcoins, from when they bought before, kind of deal. But I'm looking forward to the possibilities and the higher probability odds of a break. For I will finish this video off by stating, within charting, how I like to look at this, and really anything for trying to predict any kind of probability, is what's the chances of such an event to occur. And when we're talking about stuff like what's the chances for number 17 to come up on the roulette wheel, well, I think it's a 1 in 35 because there's 36 different numbers. So 35 losses to 1 win, that's easy math. What's the chances of the market having a 25% move, we'll say, in the next 5 days? I'm not going to give you an answer to that. However, it's pretty darn near high. Back in here, it was okay, and as high as it was before. Back here, it was terrible. It was already in a big, big bear market. Although you never know when you have a fast move to go higher, because in here, there you go, there's your fast move. But when you get into situations like in here, the odds of that kind of move isn't that great. But here, because the technical analysis is showing very, very, very good setup, that to me just increases the probability odds of such an event. Thank you for tuning in. Have yourself a great day. Bye-bye.